Hi, everybody. Mitch Sandbam here. Thanks for joining me today for this week's security news update. In the security privacy alert section, Plex has urged, strong word, its users to change their passwords after a breach. Now, they claim the passwords were scrambled. My eggs this morning were scrambled too, but that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't figure out what was in them. I think that's probably the problem they have. Scrambled is a relative term. Sounds like maybe it was a weak encryption scheme or something like that. Or, they said it was scrambled, so I'm guessing it wasn't just plain text. I would hope they're not lying. Anyway, if you use Plex, change your password, and if you reuse that password anyplace else, change that as well. So that's the bad news if you're a Plex user. Now, if you're an Apple user, I got some more bad news, and I don't really have a good news part of it. This is not a good news, bad news one. So hacking cars over the last several years have been turned into a bit of a hobby for people. This is no different. And a lot of times they get hacked through the car radio, which is now referred to as an infotainment system. So they can charge a lot more than they used to charge for car radios. There's a bug in Apple CarPlay. Apple has released the patch for the bug, but you're dependent on the automakers and the makers of the third-party radios to go off and fix this particular bug. For the most part, nobody's done that. There are a few, I guess, aftermarket products that have done it, but no car makers, zero car makers have done it. And this is a zero-click bug. It doesn't require anybody to do anything. And uh, uh, as a kind of extra added benefit, not only can you go off and I'm looking for something here in the writing, I'm not finding it, but so I'm just going to move on because that would be a good plan since I can't find what I'm looking for. Anyway, you can think of your car as an Internet of Things device, kind of like your Siri, only a lot more expensive. And, they have to be patched just like, Siri does. Now, the good news about Apple is they patch Siri for you. The car makers, a few of the car makers have the ability to do some patching over the air. Tesla is kind of taking the lead in that, but also, Kia and GM, Mercedes can do some patching over the air, but some patching they can do over the air, some patching they can't. But at least at this point, they haven't done any patching. And so, that kind of represents a problem. They've got to be able to figure out how to do this over the air because, if you got 10 million Internet of Things cars out there, you just can't run them through the dealer's warranty bays because you just can't do it. For one thing, the dealers are going to revolt because the manufacturers don't pay them very much for doing warranty work. They're hoping that the dealers will be thrilled that they get warranty work kind of at cost because it brings the customer in to the dealership and maybe they'll buy something else where the dealer has more margin. But I think this is kind of a preview of things to come because, these cars are going to be becoming more and more computerized and I think it's just going to get worse before it gets better. I think the car makers have done, a fairly decent job of trying to, track the bugs and get rid of them. But obviously, this one, given this has been around, released 6 months ago, this must be a tough one for the car makers to fix for whatever reason. In the CMMC section, I'm going to highlight one item again, as I do every week. November 10th is a magic date for folks that have to comply with CMMC. Contracts that are awarded after November 10th, you're going to need to show that you're certified for whatever level the contract requires. And there's not any choice here on the part of the contracting officer. If the 7025 clause is in there and it says you must be level 1, then if you're not level 1 in SPURS, that's not going to happen. If the contract says you have to be level 2 self-certified, then you better have a score of, and this is a change, 88 or better in SPURS because otherwise you're not going to get the contract. And if it says you have to have a third-party C3PAO, then you better have that C3PAO's paperwork in EMAS, which is the system they use. So, that's a change. And if you're not all over this by now, well, you obviously haven't been listening to my podcast. So you must be new to the podcast. But if you're not all over this, November 10th is coming really quickly, and there's no way that you can get this done in a month or two. That's just not possible. In the software and hardware checkout, Apple has added new memory protection feature in iOS. And to be honest, even though, Apple is hyping the crap out of this, they're just keeping up with Microsoft and Google. It's a good feature. It's called Memory Integrity Enforcement. It's designed to help, won't eliminate, but help stop memory corruption bugs from being exploited. It's going to raise the cost and time for hackers to do that. So it's a good thing. And, the even better thing for Apple is it only works on an iPhone 17 family phone. So if you have your trusty old iPhone 16, what they like you to do is throw that away or probably responsibly recycle it and send it to China, where people can then get hacked. That's kind of a win-win for Apple. They get to sell you a new iPhone 17, and they get to help national defense by weakening China's security. So, that's just what it is. I don't think anybody's going to go throw away their iPhone 16 just because. But it is nice that the next phone that you buy, whenever that is, will have this feature in it, and it helps keep the bad guys out. In the important issues department, this is an interesting one. The U.S. Department of Transportation is warning local governments that roadside signs apparently contain undocumented radios in them. The radios might be in the battery, they might be in the charger, and these signs are already Wi-Fi enabled because it'd be way too expensive to go off and run wires to every sign on the road that is changeable. So these are all wireless, and a few extra radios. I'm sure they figure most people won't detect. These radios likely call back to China. No telling what they might do. So they're kind of saying beware. In the legislative and legal department, the appeals court upheld much of California's social media addictive feeds law. The lobbying arm of Meta and Google and those people, called the Net Choice, argued that the law was unconstitutional and it was overbroad and it was vague and blah, blah, blah. Well, the court didn't buy any of that crap. They did argue about one or two things, but one of the things that they didn't argue about is the requirement for age verification for social media to figure out whether they are talking to a kid or not. And I'm not a big fan of these age verification laws because they're just messy all over. I'll talk about one of the breaches this week. I think it was in here, or maybe, yep, it is. That is an example of why that's problematic. So, but this is going to go back down to the district court to clean up a few nits, and I'm sure it'll come back for appeal, and then it'll probably go to the Supremes, and the Supremes will either decide to take it or not take it. So this thing is not decided yet, but nonetheless, it is definitely this was not what the social media lobby wanted. In the breaches department, Burger King's parent, Restaurant Brands, got hacked. I'd say hacked, but not really, because they left the door open, left the windows open. They put a welcome sign out. I mean, they did everything they could do to invite the hackers in. And of course, the hackers did in fact come in. And likewise, I'm sure they didn't do it on purpose. I would assume that they were not aware that they had done this. But my question to you is, do you know whether you've left the back door open, the front door open, the windows open, put a ladder out front to make it easier to get to the second? I mean, all these things. If you don't have a high degree of confidence, then please contact us. Speaking of the Department of Defense, in the do as I say, not as I do department, The Department of Defense is, they've released this new CMMC regulation, but at the same time, they, until very recently, had published basically the passwords to their social media accounts on a DoD site that didn't even require a user ID and password. So, DoD said, "My bad," which is good, and they fixed that. But nonetheless, it just points out that security is difficult. And as I was alluding to before, the whole idea of government issued IDs and websites having to keep track of them. The Brazilian dating app called Saphos, which is designed for the lesbian crowd, it was hacked. It's a startup. It's only been around for less than a year. They did keep the mandated government identity documents, and the result of that was the hackers broke in, they stole all the documents, and they published them. Since this is a startup, don't know whether or not they'll even survive. My guess is they probably won't, at least in this incarnation. A bunch of people will lose their jobs, investors will lose their money, and people who are using the app and thought it was safe to do so will discover that. And again, I don't think they're bad. I just think they didn't spend enough attention on securing the app. 2 cable cuts in the same area, which is the Red Sea in the Middle East. Maybe it's an accident. Stretch. 3 cable cuts. Not so likely. 4 cable cuts. Definitely not an accident. Well, that's what we're dealing with right now. These cables obviously carry internet traffic, and that's representing a problem for the carriers as they try to move bits back and forth between Europe and Asia. Duke Energy here in the States agrees to stop using Chinese batteries with those radios that I was talking about a few minutes ago. And they were using them in a carrier-grade battery backup system at Camp Lejeune. And they came to an agreement with the Army that they're going to get rid of these Chinese-made batteries by 2027. Yeah. So they're going to keep using them for another 2 years. Let the Chinese steal stuff in the meantime. But by 2027, we should have those out of there. In fairness, I think they figured out a way to disable the radio part of it, and they're doing things manually. Switzerland, which has been known to be a privacy haven, is now turning into the next Russia. There is a law which is about to go into effect, which requires app makers and websites. I'm not actually sure how pervasive it is, but it's pretty obnoxious. But basically, it requires backdoors and all the encryption to make it easier for the government to spy on people. And of course, the government says, "Oh, trust us, not a problem. Well, we promise not to abuse." Yeah, right, sure. I believe you. Not. So already some companies are moving out of Switzerland, moving their infrastructure out of Switzerland and into the EU where the laws are stronger. So we'll see. We'll see what Switzerland does. This is not good for business for them. And lastly, in the security news bites, we've identified 45 new domains that are command and control domains for, China's Salt Typhoon. The AI genie is not going to get put back in the bottle. It's just not going to happen. Expedia built an AI to help you plan your trip, and you can ask it how to build a Molotov cocktail, and it says, here's how to do that. Now, maybe they've blocked that particular one now, but it did when the researchers tested it. Speaking of misguided laws, 500 researchers wrote a letter to the EU urging them to come up with a better plan to combat child sexually abusive information, or CSAM, what used to be called kiddie porn. And we shall see what the EU does. They seem hell-bent on implementing this law one more time, where the government wants to get into your private matters. The theory behind this law is the scanning is going to be done on your device. And I'm not exactly sure how that works, and if that means computers as well as phones. But and then if there's a match, they're going to report it, and it's not clear what happens at that point. but the likelihood of, many false positives and an equal number of false negatives, highly likely. And, what happens to people who, found to supposedly have CSAM when in fact it's not CSAM at all. It's just a false positive. So it sounds awfully messy to me, but government likes simple solutions. And unfortunately, simple solutions are typically not very effective. Next, the senator is urging the FTC to investigate Microsoft over security defaults. The challenge with Microsoft is they love to be backward compatible with things so that they don't break anything as a function of adding new capabilities. This is an example where the security default that they're using led to a big breach, and it wasn't secure, and they didn't disable it by default. But in fact, they left it as a default. So who knows what's going to come from that? I don't know whether the FTC will even take it up. This is brilliant on the part of the scammers. The scammers are using Grok to spread malware on Twitter. They're basically using Twitter's AI against it, and it's pretty effective. And it's really a very elegant sort of hack that they've developed. It doesn't require compromising anything, and you just get to ask Grok to do something for you, and it does it. Um, Unfortunately, um, other than maybe not asking certain questions, which we don't necessarily know what those questions are at this point. Um, this one is hard for you to avoid. I think most importantly, this particular attack requires you to click on a link, in this case in Twitter. So, the less links you click on, the less likely you are to fall for this kind of thing. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening. And if you need some assistance, we'll be happy to help you with that. Until next time, stay safe. And it's a dangerous world out there. So be vigilant. Take care.